Hello, and welcome to The Mind of a Therapist, a podcast where I interview psychotherapists and helping professionals on what they're passionate about in order to provide you with messages of encouragement and hope. I'm your host, Andrew Earl. The Mind of a Therapist is sponsored by Psychological Counseling Services, healing hearts and transforming lives. Look into our intensive at pcsintensive.com. In today's conversation, I have the pleasure of speaking with Maya Benning-Codina. Maya is currently a certified sex addiction therapy candidate, specializes in supporting women struggling with relational challenges. She utilizes CBT, mindfulness-based stress reduction, Gestalt, and narrative therapy in her work. She has extensive career counseling experience that she utilizes to help clients that feel stuck in their career, are struggling with their work, or are looking to switch paths that they're on. Maya is a certified rehab counselor. She has worked with veterans, individuals with severe psychopathology, and people with disabilities. She holds a master's degree in Rehabilitation Counseling from Northeastern Illinois University and a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of South Florida. Her favorite psychologists are Carl Jung because of his work and focus on individuation, dream analysis, personal archetypes, and whole person therapy. Fritz Perls, the father of Gestalt Therapy, who focuses on one's conscious observer and inner awareness to tap into the whole self, not only the symptoms. And she's a strong advocate for the promise of hope and everyone's ability to make positive and sustainable life changes, which aligns with the mission of this podcast. So without further ado, here's my interview with Maya. All right, Maya, thanks for being on the podcast today. The first question I typically ask guests is, how do you view change? What does it take for individuals to change, for relational systems to change, for bigger systems to change? It's kind of big question, open question, so take it where you will.
Yeah, so how do people change? I mean, I think the first step is kind of obvious, is something has to happen where they feel either a level of, hopelessness or despair, or something where there's something wrong. There's an identifiable problem. And in my experience, a lot of people who truly get to the point where they feel the need to change encounter something that feels like a rock bottom. And that's different for everyone, right? Some people's rock bottom is a near miss, driving, and they almost have an accident, and all of a sudden their driving changes, right? But it can be something more dramatic, like someone who enters programs, anonymous programs, where the quote is, jails, institutions, or death are the only other option when you hit that depth of a rock bottom. So I think there's this identifiable problem, and life isn't working. It's not sustainable. It's not manageable anymore. And so something has to change. And so there has to be that willingness and that noticing of, this is not sustainable for me. I can't continue like this.
Yeah, that some sort of problem's been identified, and oftentimes it is like a rock bottom moment when that really serves as that impetus for change then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some people don't hit such a deep rock bottom. Some people are in a career they don't like, then they feel dissatisfied, and they're like, you know what, I'm just going through the motions, and I don't want to go through the motions anymore, so I'm going to do something different. But if we're talking about like deep inner change, something where people kind of come out with maybe a more profound outcome, there's usually some level of rock bottom, quote unquote.
Yeah. And you mentioned career change there, and one of your areas of focus is career counseling. I think this would be a good segue to ask some questions on that topic. When people generally come to you for career counseling, where are they? Like, what is that presenting problem for them? Is it like this? I'd imagine it's this stuckness at work. Would you share a bit about where people generally are when they come to you?
Sure. Some people are completely unemployed, like when I work with the disability community. And so someone who has a disability maybe never worked or has limited work experience. So they've only done like job coaching experience where they've had a really part-time job 1 to 2 hours a week to learn, and now they want to work but aren't finding the opportunities. So we create resumes and cover letters and go through all the job development skills. So what do they need to do to learn how to job search, and where are they lacking, where are they strong? And then some people come in and they're just dissatisfied, where they're like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I've been working for such and such company. It's not satisfying, or I'm not advancing. And then some people have big barriers to employment, like physical disabilities, or they've gone through the work comp system, registered sex offenders. So I've encountered a number of different job seekers who are looking for a way to be in the workforce competitively, and not in, like we've had sheltered workshops in the past where they're, sorting hangers in the back of a laundromat, but that's not what they want to do. They want something more, but how do they break into the labor market?
Yeah, and what are some of the ways that you would then work with someone to support them in moving towards work that would be more satisfying, be more preferable for them?
One of the assessments I like to use is the career scope, or the COPS assessment. I would say I use the COPS assessment more because I find that it's easily understood for a variety of types of learners. So it looks at your interests, your aptitudes, and your work values, and then it matches you with categories. There's 14 different categories, and then in each of those categories in your results, you can click on a hyperlink and it'll take you to jobs that fall under that category. And so people are able to look and see if they've got all gold across one category. That means their interest, aptitudes, and work values all align. So someone may have gotten their degree in finance, but when they take this assessment, they may find that they have strong abilities in arts professional or clerical, communication, tech skilled, or whatever. And with some extra training or education, they could make a full career change because their natural abilities already show they'd be successful there.
Yeah. And that's COPS assessment. Is that COPS, or what is the acronym?
Yeah, the COPS assessment. That's a good question. What does it stand for? It's
Yeah.
made by Ed. Um, I don't even know what the COPS stands for. So it's COPS is one part, CAPS is the other part, and COPS is the other part. So COPS looks at your interest, CAPS is your aptitudes, and then COPS is your work values.
Okay. And is this an assessment that someone would need to go to a therapist to do, or can you find, like, if our listeners are interested, could you find it online, or administer it yourself?
You can. I mean, we buy tokens and then we use tokens to submit them. I found out about it working with the VA as a subcontractor. And so working with TCRG, we administer that to all of our veterans automatically when they go through one of our programs. And so it's always just been automatic like that. But, in private practice, we purchase it and then we use our tokens, and someone would then, pay for the assessment through the agency.
Okay. Well, that seems like a helpful tool, and I imagine it would be a difficult position if you're, into a career. You've got the familiarity with that work. There's a sense of security there, but maybe there's also a part of you that kind of feels unsatisfied with the work, and then you take this assessment, and it kind of indicates, maybe a different direction career-wise would be a better fit. How do you work with people? What do you find is helpful for people, working with that dissonance there? And is that a common experience people have?
Dissonance in what they want to do or what they've already been trained in, and then having to maybe reconcile that what they're naturally good at is different than what they've pursued.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people tend to gravitate towards what they're already naturally good at. Some people who score in the 95th percentile or higher in everything are like, oh, well, that doesn't help me. So I'm naturally good at a number of things. I'm scoring really high across all categories. Yeah, that means they have probable success in anything they pursue. The interests are really indicative of what's going to internally motivate you to want to get out of bed every day and to go to work. So if you're scoring high in communication and service professional, then you would be great as a therapist, right? Because that's 100% of what you're doing all day, every day. So in that sense, yeah, you might score high in tech professional and science skilled, but if that's on your lowest interest, well, you may not be extra motivated to go pursue careers in that area. So the nice thing about the COPS assessment is that it'll show you a number of college majors you could take, all of the careers that fall under that, what the skill sets are. So if you look through those and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm good with data numbers, but I don't want to sit at a desk all day, then you might rule that out and say, you know what, let's find something that maybe has a better balance between the things that I have for my top 3 interests and my top 3 aptitudes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with career counseling, I never took a course on career counseling, and I've not done it personally, so I just don't have a ton of familiarity with it. How many sessions do people generally do when they're seeking career counseling? And do you kind of weave like from career counseling to other work? I know you're training like Gestalt and Jungian model. Um, how what does the flow look like with career counseling?
Probably the first 2 sessions, you always find out what clinical relevancy there is to something. So there's oftentimes, an underlying thing that's going on, like there's depression or there's scheduling that's happening or family issues or personal things that are happening. And someone's maybe contemplating a move. Like, do I want to move out of country? Do I want to move out of state? Where can I really be happy? And I think, that's kind of the magical question a lot of people come in with is what's going to make me happy? What's my purpose? What am I here to do? And how can I be useful or do something meaningful? And I usually do pretty brief solution focused therapy if I'm working with a highly skilled person. So if they're coming in and they just want to change jobs, they need a resume revamp, cover letter help. What's the job market look like? I haven't changed in 10 to 15 years, so I feel out of the loop. Then we'll kind of go over, well, let's look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. What do you want to make? What's your earnings now? How do we get there? What are people being trained in? And so that can be really brief. Someone may say, yeah, I want to work in cybersecurity. So let's find out. Let's look at the postings on Indeed, on LinkedIn, on USA Jobs, and what are people coming in with in terms of skill sets? And if you're lacking something, what do you need to add to your resume and your skill set in order to go further? So that can be really brief. But then there's also people who come in with no skills and maybe like a high school graduate, is coming in and saying, I have no idea what I want to do. I don't know how to write a resume. I've never job searched. I don't build online profiles. And so we'll go through, could be 3 to 6 months of just job skill development. Here's the websites that you use. This is how you positively present yourself. Let's practice mock interviewing and sample questions and going through all of those things.
Yeah. So yeah, it really varies depending on what the client's bringing in. Maybe they have these skills and a lot of job and work experience, and they just need more of a brief support. Or maybe it's they're newer to the workforce, and with those folks who are trying to identify what they want to do. What do you find is helpful? What are questions? What are areas that you mentioned that assessment? Is that kind of what you lean on, and or what else is helpful for folks trying to identify the direction they want to head?
So one of the things I like to encourage people to do is what I call blueprinting, and I learned that from one of my previous employers. That was kind of his term that he coined, and I ask them to call up the places where they want to work. Find a job posting that's your dream job, your dream salary, and call them and ask for HR and say, what's a typical day look like in this role? And some employers are not willing to talk to you at all. Some employers are really willing to talk to you. And, we've encouraged, especially job seekers through the work comp system, show up somewhere that you want to work every day, and show up there once a week, twice a month, and tell them, I know you're not hiring, but I want to work here. And can I shadow a job? Could I observe? What does someone in this role do? And some places will let you. In grad school, we had to do job shadowing to write reports about, could a person do this job, like with Social Security hearings. Let's say I'm arguing that, a person with a certain disability could be a checker or a cashier at a place, then I have to be able to cite, well, what does that person do? Can they sit and stand on the job? Do they need to use both upper extremities? How much of their fingers are they using in their hands? And when doing that, what percentage of the day is spent doing those tasks? You know, if they can't lift a 50-pound bag of cat food, can they actually be a checker? That depends on the place and what they're selling, right? So in that sense, I think blueprinting and cold calling, asking to job shadow, and if it's somewhere you can just observe what they're doing, go to the movie theater and see what the usher does for, 20, 30, and once you do that, then and this is for more unskilled jobs, let's say, it's kind of covered by the DOT, an unskilled job, but, for something that's more intense, there's so many resources out there, like the Occupational Network, the Occupational Handbook, Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can find so much information about careers through a number of different resources.
Yeah, and that seems so helpful. I wish someone had me do that when I was younger, is go and call, these different employers who I'd be excited to work for, and just ask them, what does a day look like in this position? Maybe if you can go and really see what that work looks like, it could help with
Mhm.
having a lot of clarity on what direction to head.
Yeah, especially if you have a clear idea of what you want, right? So if you're someone, especially with a disability who needs to be able to sit and stand in the workday, and you're going to work in cybersecurity, some places may have you at a desk with no windows in a little cubicle for 8 hours a day. Other places may have you working with actual systems where you're configuring things and you're sitting, standing, bending, stooping, crouching. So, if you have someone with like back and knee injuries, that's not going to be a suitable job for them, but they may succeed in a cubicle area, or if they could get a sit stand desk and still do the same thing, maybe there's an accommodation. But if you don't call and find out, that's not always in the posting what the physical demands of the job are.
Yeah. And yeah, that seems like such an important consideration, absolutely, for someone with a disability, to consider the physical piece of the job and what the physical requirements are. But also for, I think people without disabilities, what do you want to be doing in a day? Is it okay, are you comfortable sitting all day, or would you like a job where you're up and moving around and being more physically active, perhaps being outside? W- be curious to talk a bit more about, I know you have a specialty too in supporting people with disabilities. What are some of the biggest obstacles folks in that community face generally, and then specifically in finding jobs that are a good fit?
Well, the first one is obviously stigma, right? So anyone that has a visible disability is already facing a huge barrier with an employer. And then if you have a mental health disability and it's not a visible disability, right? Then when you're going to present yourself to an employer and they're perceiving you as not disabled and you want to ask for an accommodation, like you change your depression medication and now you're sleeping in the mornings, right? A lot of employers are not willing to make accommodations, even though it's written in law. There are so many places that will argue and say, no, our business hours are 9 to 5. Therefore, you can't work 8 to 4 or 10 to 6. No one's here past 5 o'clock. We can't accommodate that. And I think if more employers were willing to open their minds and see that there's so much value in hiring someone with a disability, they would find that they would have a diversified workforce, and they would be offering an opportunity to someone who oftentimes people in the disability community desperately want to work, but they don't have opportunity. And so, we have a workforce development network here in the Chicago area that I used to be really involved in. And one of our job seekers, um, was on the autism spectrum, and he really wanted to work at Panera. And so this job developer worked hard to build a relationship with the HR manager and said, look, I want you to look in your workday. Where do you have a need? Where does business get so busy that you can't seem to get everything out at the speed you need to? Turned out they needed help with spreading cream cheese on the bagels in the morning. So this job seeker, who couldn't handle an 8-hour workday but could handle 3 to 4 hours, was able to go in and be the fastest cream cheese spreader. One task that he could focus on for a short period of time helped their business maintain their sales and generate more sales. And then they were able to get orders out faster. But it took that relationship through the job developer and the manager to see that there would be a value and an identified need. Not all employers think like that.
Yeah. And what's your sense of where this why the stigma exists? Where, I mean, that's a big question, I guess, but why is there such a big stigma around folks with disabilities?
I think a lot of employers are seeking to generate high profits. They're seeking to have these fast paced, high intensity environments, production, fabrication, machining, all that stuff, right? Like we want to make as much as we can in as short of time as possible. If you're an order picker, you have to meet a certain quota every shift. Otherwise, they'll just move on. And you have staffing agencies right now, too, where that's kind of a loophole for the ADA in a way is that, you know, a lot of staffing companies can pre-screen people. So they can screen out a job seeker with a disability right away, and then that they're never getting to the interview for the company because let's say, I don't know, I'll just make up, you know, bearing screws, and they're going to hire people through this staffing agency. So they know that this staffing agency is going to interview all these people, pre-screen them, and only send them the candidates that they feel are going to meet what Bearing Screws wants for their workforce. And so, yeah, I think that the stigma just comes from kind of a capitalistic mentality of like, the faster we can do it, the more we can do it, the higher the profits, you know, and people miss out on the community aspect of like when we include everyone, the impact that that has on our community is so much greater, but the opportunity to do that is often limited when there's stigma attached to a certain group who's looking to join the workforce.
Yeah. So, for folks who have a disability and have been searching for work and maybe have experienced some of this stigma and discrimination you're talking about, maybe for someone who can't afford, to see someone like you, a career counselor who can really offer them support. What sort of advice, messages would you have for that person?
So, if someone is a veteran, there's obviously services through the VA that they can search for. There's vocational readiness and employment if they have a service connected disability rating. There's PCPG, which is personalized guidance and career counseling. Um, if you were someone who had state funding or was on Social Security disability insurance, you can sometimes go through state vocational rehab, or you can go through nonprofit rehab, which, you know, might include something that's specific towards physical disabilities, or vocational evaluators through the work comp system, or if you have a background or you're a registered sex offender, there's agencies that sometimes go specifically towards one population. And so I think if someone is sort of in that world or has dealt with that for at least a small chunk of time, they'll be connected to some of the resources, or at least, you know, have an idea of what's out there. But if not, those are places I would start.
That's good. And then what are some things people can do, like maybe messages that you'd have for people, maybe things that you've seen people in, like processes people engage in that have been helpful as they're, looking for work that's a good fit?
So I tell my job seekers that they have to present themselves as the number one candidate and be really diligent in their job search. This is not like dating on Tinder or a dating app where you can just swipe left and right and, you know, it's going to happen match like that. Job seeking is a skill, and it takes actual work to go out there and interview properly, to have the right attire, to feel confident when you're presenting yourself to an employer, to be confident to express, you know, if you have a background, what have you done to work through that? How have you changed? What do they need to know about you? How to present yourself up front ahead of time. If you have a background that's never going to go away, waiting until they offer you the job is not always the best route to go. Sometimes it's much better to get in front of it and tell someone, hey, this is in my background. I want you to know this ahead of time. I don't want this to impact my ability to work here. And we can't predict whether an employer is going to automatically discredit you and say we found someone with more experience. They might. That's unavoidable. But job seeking is really a numbers game. You have to put your resume out there sometimes 200 times in a year before you get a job, because if you're going through Indeed Apply, you don't know how many hundreds of people have already applied to that, especially in a labor market like where I'm at in Chicagoland. We have millions of people here that are job seeking every day. So you might not be the best candidate, but you have to make those extra steps to stand out. So that might look like calling the employer. That might look like showing up there in person with a resume in hand. Even if they tell you, oh, we do everything online. I know, I've already applied online. I wanted to hand deliver a resume and introduce myself. Some people find it annoying. You're looking for the employer that's going to value the extra effort that you're putting in, because that shows what type of worker you are.
Yeah, showing that initiative. I was talking to someone recently about how, and this was a small business owner, how she's observed it's been hard for her to find employees who really take initiative, and in doing what you're talking about there, you're really communicating that initiative with your behavior. You're not just talking about your skill set. You're actually kind of living out your skill set and showing them like how much you want this job. And then I also appreciated what you're saying, and that seems like a great approach for someone who might have a background of some sort of, just put that out front, be communicative, and I think people generally appreciate that transparency and being forward.
And not everyone will. And that's
Yeah,
just a part of it, right? If you're dating and you go out on a bunch of dates, some people will like you, some people won't, and that's okay.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's such a important message too for those who are listening, who are job searching. Is it's just it's you're going to be rejected, and that's
Yeah.
that's hard, but that's a reality of the process of job searching.
Yep. And I think, getting comfortable with rejection and getting comfortable with the fact that, I express it as I'm not for everyone and everyone's not for me. Some places aren't going to be a good fit for you as an employee, and that's okay. Every work culture is different, and you're looking for a place, or at least I hope most people are looking for a place where they can grow and be valued and have an enjoyable work-life balance. Some people don't care where they work. They just want the paycheck to go home. It doesn't matter if they have to work in a factory and it's hot and sticky all day. They don't care. And that's okay, because they just look at it as a means to an end. But some people are really searching for job satisfaction, somewhere they can grow, where it feels meaningful and valuable and they're making a difference. It's also partially personal preference.
Yeah, and I'm curious how you got into career counseling. What was that journey for you?
Well, this is kind of a funny story, because before I got my master's degree, I knew I wanted to work in drug and alcohol counseling. So I had always heard that people who are addicts go to rehab. So I thought, well, then I'll get a master's in rehab counseling. So I applied to a bunch of different universities and I go to all the open houses, and I attend one at Northeastern Illinois University, which is where I ended up going to school. And they talk a little bit about drug and alcohol counseling, but the majority of what they're talking about is physical rehab, working with people with disabilities, working with people with mental health concerns. And I was kind of interested, but I was like, oh, they did mention drug and alcohol rehab. So I guess that's the route. Like, this would be a good fit. I ended up getting the rehab scholarship grant there. So I was going to go there anyways because it was more affordable for me to go there. But long story short, when I got in the program and I realized that my future career was going to be working with people with disabilities and employment, I had not done my homework. I did not blueprint my school. I did not blueprint my field. I did
Mm,
not look up what people would make. I just assumed that working as a therapist, you would make decent money. And, I didn't know that in the nonprofit sector, counselors with master's degree can start out at $30,000 a year. And, living in Chicago, I was, hey, I didn't do any homework or research, but I was already involved in it and I was already going through the program. So I just decided to stick with it. and figure out, what can I do with this career? So I sort of stumbled into it in a way
Yeah.
because I didn't have that skill set. Nobody had taught me how to job search. I took career exploration or something in high school, but that was just job shadowing. So I job shadowed a teacher for a year.
Well, your story sounds like my story in a lot of areas of my life where I learn as I go, learn from
Hmm.
mistakes and yeah, how nice that is that then you can support, the people who are consulting you from the your own experience.
Yeah, I mean, had I been able to look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics before I got my degree, I might have chosen a completely different career path. If money was my primary motivator, then maybe I would have decided to go into tech or cybersecurity or marketing or something like that. But when, my passion I always knew was helping people, and I wanted to be involved in something with mental health or with addiction. And, for my own reasons, that was something I found interesting. And I did end up doing what I want to do, but the road that I took to get here was maybe not the direct path that some people could take if they had support from a career counselor and someone that could really guide them through each step of the process, especially early on, like with a high school or college graduate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we've touched on capitalism and it, well, I was thinking, part of the decision, for people in terms of what career direction they go, there's, it seems like there's these, like different variables that most people are looking at. Income is a big one. Work-life balance. How like purposeful or meaningful the work is, and everyone kind of has a different, set of values, where different weight of those pieces there. What do you offer guidance for people on, kind of looking at that income level versus looking at this idea of like doing something that you love or are passionate about? Like what sort of conversations are you having with people on those topics?
So that's where I love the career assessment, is because then we're able to look at where they show probable success. So if their interests, aptitudes, values all match, and we're looking in those career categories, then we can talk about, look, this is already a match for you. This shows that you will likely be successful in this area. Let's look at what the earning capacity is in these categories. What's the average salary according to the BLS for someone who is working in printmaking or sculpting, if that's even a category, because not every job is in a category if it's a relatively rare or uncommon job. And so, if someone says, I want to work in human resources, well, let's go see, what does the human resource specialist make? What does the director make? What does the person who's working in training and development or payroll make? And if money is a motivator, they might want to pursue the one that has the highest salary potential or specialize in something. So maybe they get their degree in HR management, but they also specialize in accounting and payroll, or they get some specialization in business operations, whatever, the school offers in terms of programming.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I've also thought of this. I recently read this book. Well, not recently. I've actually been talking about it on the podcast for a year or so now. It's a great book I recommend to everyone, called "The Choice" by Edith Eiger. She's a Holocaust survivor, and similar to other survivors of trauma and catastrophes like that, come up with this understanding that choice is so important. That's her thesis, that like in any given moment, we have the ability to choose one's attitude, to like make the most of a situation. And so I was curious, there's that concept, and then there's also this concept you're bringing up of like how good of a fit is a job for a person with a given skill set. I don't know if I even have a question here, but it's just kind of these thoughts of like someone in a certain position. Is it when is it more of a mindset thing? Maybe they just kind of have a part of them that's, taking over, that's blending, that just kind of has a negative outlook on jobs. And it's like not necessarily it doesn't matter what job they will be in, but maybe be in this state of mind, this part kind of blending with them. How do you kind of suss out whether it's that or whether it's just the job is just not a good fit or with a person's given skill set?
Um, well, yeah, that's a big question
That's
that you're asking. Yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot to
There's a lot
unpack in
there.
that one. Choice and parts and
Yeah.
happiness and motivators and what breeds success, all those things. One of the things that I love to use in all my therapy session is parts work and things and techniques that are pulled from internal family systems. And so just talking to whatever part is showing up surrounding their thoughts about work. So if there's this anxious part saying, I don't know if I'm going to be successful, I don't know if I can do this. Yeah, I went to school for HR, but I never used this system, or I have no insight about X, Y, or Z, or this is going to be my first professional job. Okay, well, what does that part need or want? What's that part afraid of? How can that part be helpful to you now? Or whatever the question might be that comes up in the conversation with those parts is, doing some deeper work just on what's happening internally for the person. Because if we're getting hijacked by a part before we go into the interview and all of a sudden our mind is running blank, if I know someone might have a history of that, I'm going to want to talk to that part. How
Yeah.
old does that person feel when they're going into the interview? And just probing deeper into some of those thoughts and feelings and opinions that come up surrounding trauma or surrounding certain situations.
That's great. Using the external, the job searching process, and all that comes up there to look inwards, to get in touch with the parts of the person that are triggered in certain situations. That's really nice.
I think too, if someone has a trauma background, then, where are they in the polyvagal chart? If they're in dorsal shutdown and total energy conservation mode, and they feel, I have one job seeker who feels really stuck and feels unable to apply for a job. She got some job offers and was unable to take both of them and backed out of them. So that's more of a clinical situation that I'm observing. So we might work on developing her inner advocate and what are some daily tiny habits that she could start implementing into her day-to-day life that will help get her work ready. Because it's likely that if she's in a full depressive episode and she's not able to get out of bed and she's sleeping 16 hours a day, is she really work ready? And how can we help her to get work ready? So we want to get her inner advocate really working for her. And a lot of times, for me, in my experience, I've seen clients start with tiny habits like drinking an 8-ounce glass of water before coffee and making sure that they have some sense of success. And it could be anything. Maybe they want to do 10 push-ups after they get out of bed before they leave their bedroom, or, they want to take vitamins, whatever it is. It can be something so small, but for them to feel a sense of success in any area, whatever it is that their tiny habit is that they choose, once they're able to have that inner advocate cheering them on and feeling like they have some semblance of success, that's the choices, right? So when they make that choice to pursue those tiny habits, I start to see them, even if it's really slow progress, it's still progress. And we want to capitalize on that and use that momentum to help propel them and push the needle forward, even if it's not on a time frame that someone who's not struggling with depression would want, right? That might be their time frame. And so I have to respect where they're at.
Yeah, that's nice. And I love that idea of taking the time to recognize those successes, like you're saying, recognize the steps, however small, that people are taking in the directions that they're wanting to head in life.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Well, we're getting towards the end of the interview here, and before I ask the last question that I ask guests, is there anything else that you've got going on in your mind that you're wanting to share?
I think really I just work is how people define themselves. Most people want to work and they want to have a sense of purpose and they want to feel valued, seen, heard, felt, right? All the therapy terms that we've probably heard a number of times. And people don't experience that in isolation. And work often gives us a sense of community. It gives us a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose. And so I really just encourage anyone who's listening, if they are an employer and they're able to make hiring decisions, to think outside the box a little bit instead of, maybe thinking only in business terms, right? Think about the type of workforce that you want and what kind of company culture do you want to have and how can you create that? And what are the benefits of having an inclusive work culture that includes everyone and doesn't keep, the disability community, in my opinion, is one of the most ostracized still in today's society. And I would just love to see more people with disabilities in the workforce because I think they bring so much value and so much uniqueness and they have differing skill sets. And I just think, yeah, people want to be included. People want to be in community. And we actually need that as humans. We know that from a psychology perspective. So, yeah, I think that's such an important reminder.
Oh, that's great, and I'm so drawn to what you're saying there. Of it's rather than just thinking from that transactional capitalist perspective, viewing, because work. You're so right. Work is more than just the monetary. I mean that is the system we work in that we live in that does define the success of a business and the sustainability of that's definitely a reality and a piece that's there. And at the same time, the workplace does provide purpose, community. Employers provide important services to the community and purpose within the community, larger community and society. And
Mm-hmm.
so it is so important that I like, yeah, you give that message of urging employers to think creatively and think inclusively. And I love that example that you were giving earlier, Panera, and how they were able to fit that person into their business way that worked. It was a win-win. So that's really nice. And
That
yeah, before I ask you the last question, if people are interested in what you're talking about, I want to get in touch with you. Where's a good place to direct them?
Um, I think I gave you the link to our website from Willow Clinical Services. So I'm working out of Wheaton, Illinois right now, and I'm also working with the Consolidated Rehab Group, and so that's a remote position. So both of those companies I have contact information through, but I would say, I can leave my contact information with you, an email or whatever other guests have done, and that's yeah, Willow has my bio on there and our phone number for the office and then my work email. So that's one option.
Perfect. And then the last question I ask guests is, what's a message of hope you'd like to leave the listener with today?
Hmm. I think the best one is hope dies last, right? That's I'm a believer, so I always have hope. And I just think that, we all have a purpose here and there's a reason that we exist and we matter. And, how we get to our destination might be a windy road, might be a straight and narrow path, but hope dies last. There is always hope. And my mom said before she passed last year, just don't give up. Just keep going. No matter the storm, just keep going. And I think it's so cliche and so easy to say, even when things feel hopeless and you feel powerless and you're in that shut down state, right? One small thing. The best advice I ever got was do one thing every day that your future self will thank you for and don't make it worse. And I loved that advice. I thought it was so funny. Do one thing, just one thing. And if you can do more than one, do more than one. Try not to make it worse. Sometimes that happens. That's okay. Just keep going. Just
Hmm.
keep going.
Wow. And thank you for sharing that. Your mom's. I'm so sorry about that loss, and thanks for keeping her alive with that message. That's really nice.
She was such a cheerleader for everyone, all her students. I mean, yeah, thanks for the condolences, but I just can hear her in my mind right now. Just keep going. Don't give up. Never quit. I mean, she was such a powerhouse of energy, and yeah, just don't give up. Keep going.
That's great.
You can do it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for taking the time today, Maya. I really appreciate it.
Same. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Please press the subscribe button, as well as rating and reviewing our podcast. This helps others connect with what you've been hearing. If you have any questions, please contact us at themindofatherapist@gmail.com. These questions will be kept anonymous. I want to thank Eric Price for the wonderful music you hear in this podcast. Additionally, this podcast was created to provide accurate and authoritative information on the subject matter. Although we are interviewing licensed therapists, they are not your therapists. This podcast is not intended to serve as direct medical advice and should not be used as a substitute for direct professional help. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, guests, or PCS are rendering legal, clinical, or other professional information. If you need a professional, we encourage you to find one. Visit Psychology Today to connect with a licensed clinician near you.